And we are now being recorded. So the first items on the agenda, I'm just going to make a few opening remarks. I'll try to be brief, but there's certainly a lot going on in the transportation world, and both at the state and the federal level. I'm sure you all are watching what's going on very closely. But we at Caltrans have some announcements to make as well since our last meeting. So I'll share a little bit of that in some opening remarks. At the next item, we've got our colleagues Avital Barnea and Darwin Musavi from CalSTA joining us to talk about the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure and how it relates to freight and goods movement. We're going to take a brief break. We built in an extra break just because we do have a long meeting this morning, but we'll try to keep that short. And then we're going to have the Caltrans freight team, Jeff and Eric, share some updates on the freight mobility plan implementation and our work plan for the freight program. And we want to get your input on a couple of items. So we'll spend a little time on that. We've also got Marlon, our division chief of planning at Caltrans, is going to give an update on the interregional transportation strategic plan. We'll take another quick break after that. And then we want to come back to you to adopt the charter. We made a few changes to the CFAC charter since our last meeting. And we had discussion at our last meeting. So we'll remind you of the changes that we intend to make. And you should have seen that in an email in advance of the meeting as well. So we're hoping to actually adopt that charter today. And then finally, our last item is hearing from our partners at FHWA, CTC, and CalSTA, and a few other updates from Marlon as well. And then we will close by noon. So I'll try to keep us on schedule, keep us to this agenda. All right, Allison, thank you. So I just wanted to share a few things. It's been a number of months since our last meeting, so there's quite a bit going on at Caltrans. One thing that I think is really important for you to know about that's been really significant for us, and certainly for our director, Tokes, is our equity work. So if you jump to the next slide, Allison, I wanted to share and make sure you saw that we released Caltrans equity statement in December, and it's published to the website that you see here at the bottom of the slide. But just wanted to share, some highlights from this statement. We have had a lot of discussions with our executive board and our management teams, and we've also been hard at work on our new strategic management plan, which should be out very soon. And equity is becoming both a core value of Caltrans as well as a strategic goal for us going into our new strategic management plan sort of time horizon. So I'm very excited to share this. I've taken a strong leadership role in our equity work and created a new office, the Caltrans Office of Race and Equity, and I'll highlight a few of the things that office is going to do. But, with the release of this statement, we really want to, first of all, acknowledge the role that the transportation system and specifically our department and transportation agencies in the past have played in developing a system that has significant disparities between who benefits and who is burdened by the negative impacts of the transportation system. So we put that acknowledgement kind of right up front in our statement. We also, say that we recognize our important leadership role and the responsibility of state government to address those inequities, and we are certainly making that a priority. So on the next slide, I just want to highlight this statement also makes several commitments to where we plan to focus our equity work. So they're the 4 Ps that we're using to kind of guide how we're thinking about these commitments under the areas of people, which speaks to our own workforce and helping to have a workforce that's representative of the communities we serve, as well as training that workforce to really engage deeply in understanding the needs of the communities. The second P, or the second 2 Ps, is programs and projects. So I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but through our program and project work, we want to make sure we're meaningfully engaging with those communities and also improving the benefits to underserved communities through that work as well. Partnerships is a key one, exemplified by our meeting today with all of you. We really want to engage with all of our partners at the local and regional level, as well as with our private sector partners, to make sure we are utilizing our work as an opportunity to increase opportunity to underserved communities and DBEs and others with individuals with barriers to employment. And then finally, the 4th P is planet. And this is really where we highlight the important nexus of climate change and the disproportionate burden from climate risk and climate impacts on underserved communities, and wanting to make sure that as we are advancing our work to address climate change, that we are really putting the priority again on making sure we're addressing the disproportionate impact. So that is the equity statement. On the next slide, I mentioned this already, we just created a Caltrans Office of Race and Equity. That office actually reports directly to me in planning and modal programs. And I'm excited to bring together some existing functions within the department and kind of raise where they sit, such as our Native American Liaison Branch, which has previously been in our planning division and is now really elevated in this new office. And we're also focused through this office on training and building capacity internally within our workforce, as well as focusing on external community engagement and enhancing our ability to do that through our planning and project work. So I don't want to take up too much time. Maybe I'll go quickly through. Wanted to also mention that the core office, sorry, you can, yeah, this slide, core office is going to be leading some community listening sessions along with, we're working very closely with the CTC and CalSTA on doing these. We plan to roll them out this year in 2021 in the coming months, but we'll be at least initially virtually traveling around the state. But really, we want to have this be an opportunity to engage deeply in underserved communities, hear about their concerns and priorities, and also have this conversation, as I mentioned in our equity statement, sort of acknowledging the burden of past harms on those communities. So we will be reporting back and identifying areas where we can make improvements to our policies and programs through that effort. Next slide. And the core office also importantly is going to work really closely with other parts of the department. I think of them as sort of a consultancy to other areas of the department, certainly within planning and modal programs. That's really important to me, but also to our project delivery and maintenance and operations areas of the department. So there will be a lot of close work, certainly with the freight office, on a number of efforts, including the development of an equity index that we have just started. So jump to the next slide. Beyond the equity work, which I wanted to highlight for all of you, there's a lot of other things going on. Certainly, we're very excited to work with the Biden and Harris administration. I want to highlight that, given the inauguration was just yesterday. I'm sure you all paid close attention. There's a lot of activity going on already, including a bunch of new appointments this morning. So we're really looking forward to working with continuing to work with our great partners at FHWA and a lot of the new appointees coming in. And we look forward to, I know there will be discussions on reauthorization and the next stimulus bill that has been proposed. So lots more to come on that. We see some really key opportunities to advance our work in partnership with the new administration. So look forward to more on that. Of course, the California Transportation Plan 2050 has been a huge effort for us over the last year and a half, 2 years. We are right at the finish line, trying to get final comments and approvals resolved. So that should be adopted very soon. And this year will be primarily focused on implementation. So we'll have a lot more deeper discussions about implementing some key recommendations in the CTP. I already mentioned our strategic management plan that has been finalized, and we are just getting ready to release it. So look out for that soon. We can share that with you at our next CFAC meeting. I won't say anything about CAPTI, the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, because it's our next item. But that's another area where we'll really be focused on a lot of work. And then the last thing I just want to highlight is our Caltrans active transportation plans. Each of our 12 districts has been in the process of developing an active transportation plan to identify needs in each district for walking and biking facilities on and across the state highway system. So that is, I think, intersects with our freight work in important ways and is a key consideration. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. Sorry, this is my last slide. I know I've been talking for a long time, but just a couple more items to mention. The ITSP, Marlon will talk about later on the agenda, but that's another big planning effort this year. Also, it's not on the slide, but at the same time, we are updating the state rail plan. So that will closely align with the ITSP and certainly has a lot of implications for goods movement. Our district climate adaptation plans is another important effort where we're identifying needs for climate resiliency work and prioritizing that work. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. And I think we're going to talk more about the other items on this slide later in the agenda. So I will wrap up my update, but did want to make you aware of a lot of exciting activity at Caltrans. This is going to be a really busy year for us, so we will do our best to keep you updated and get your input as we go. So with that, I want to pass it off to Avital, Barnea, and Darwin Musavi at CalSTA. And I think we might need a minute to get them, give them the panelist role. So hold tight as we switch to the next item. And I can't see hands, but I wondered if just as we're transitioning, if anybody has questions for me about Caltrans activities or our equity statement. Want to just pause for any questions. Allison, can you see hands, or Jamaica?
I don't see any hands raised right now.
All right, no problem. Looks like we've got Avital and Darwin on deck, so I can hand it off to them if you guys are ready.
Great, thanks, Jeannie. Can you all hear me? Or? At least, Jeannie,
Yes.
can you hear me since you can respond?
I
All
can
right.
hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. And Avital, are you on as well? Avital just texted me. Sounds like she's having some technical difficulties.
I also just got a chat. Sorry, Darwin, hang on. I think somebody just messaged that there is not a raise hand feature for attendees. So
there is. It's rather small and different than what I'm used to. But if you open the participant panel, right above the word chat and Q&A, there's a tiny little button on the right-hand corner that says raise hand in the participant panel. There we go. Yep. So it looks like I'll pass it back to you since some folks are raising their hands, or did they put their hands down? I saw a few. Looks like we have one raised hand.
Okay. I'm trying to see if I can actually see raised hands. If you have your hand raised, since there's only one, please go ahead and unmute and ask your question. I can't tell who it is.
Looks like the hands went down. Maybe they were just testing it out.
All right. Maybe people are just testing the raise hands now that we figured out how to do it. All right, Darwin and Avital, I'll pass it to you.
All right. Well, it sounds like Avital's having some technical difficulties, and I don't have the ability to share my screen on my end. Allison, I don't know if that's something that you can. There we go. She has now made me a presenter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for bearing with us with the technical issues. Give me 1 second to get the presentation up and running. All right. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. As Jeannie mentioned, my name is Darwin Musavi. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Environmental Policy and Housing Coordination at CalSTA. I'll be joined here shortly by my colleague Avital Barnea, the Deputy for Transportation Planning at CalSTA. But I'll go ahead and get us started here, and hopefully she can join us soon. But we just wanted to take some time to briefly give you an update. Many of you have probably heard this presentation elsewhere, but some of you, this may be new content. So we wanted to loop you all into the work we're doing to develop a climate action plan for transportation infrastructure. We'll be sending out a draft soon. There'll be a public draft at the very beginning of March. So we're not quite there yet, but wanted to give you all a little bit of an update as to where we are in that process. So why are we creating a climate action plan for transportation infrastructure? There's a few key reasons. As many of you know by now, the transportation sector accounts for over half of GHG emissions, and if you just look at tailpipe emissions, it's still over 40%. Because of that, and in response to that, the governor put out 2 executive orders that called on CalSTA to take actions to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The first order was N1919 in September of 2019, which called on CalSTA to leverage state transportation spending to help meet climate goals. It specifically asked us to align planning and programming with objectives of the California Climate Change Scoping Plan, and was very much targeted at finding ways to reduce VMT through supporting infill development with our transportation projects, increasing transit, walking, and biking usage, and reducing congestion through innovative strategies that encourage people to shift from cars to other modes of travel. And to do all this while mitigating for any increases in transportation costs incurred on lower income Californians. I'll take these slides slightly out of order here. But it wasn't until EO 7920, which came out this last year in September, which was an executive order focused on our ZEV goals, that the scope of this effort was very much expanded to clearly tie to our zero emission vehicle goals and also incorporate freight by doing so. And in EO 7920, which sets clear and ambitious zero emission vehicle goals for both the light and heavy duty sectors, the executive order also calls on the need to continue expanding our clean transportation options as a means to help meet our climate goals, and acknowledges that we cannot get there alone just with our zero emission vehicle targets. And specifically called out zero emission vehicle infrastructure as a key area for us to focus on, in addition to the work that we were already doing. So real quick, in terms of what EO and 1919 said, I referenced earlier that we were called on to leverage over $5 billion of transportation infrastructure funding. Here's a list of those programs that the executive order was referring to. I think most relevant to this group in particular is probably the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, which falls under the executive order and is one of the programs that we are trying to align outcomes with climate goals as much as possible. So with that, I want to shift into talking about, that's some background on what shaped the need for the plan and why we're doing the plan. And now I want to get into the process of creating the plan. But before I do that, let me check to see, Avital, were you able to get back on?
Yes, I'm back. Thank you so much, Darwin, for covering for me. My WebEx crashed, so I am back.
Great, no worries, and glad you were able to make it back on. I'm happy to keep going with the slides. Just tell me next slide when you're ready, but I'll pass it over to you to talk about process.
Thank you so much. All right. So Executive Order N1919 was released in September 2019, and CALSTA spent the first half of 2020 engaging public and advocacy stakeholders on the order. We held individual meetings with over 200 stakeholders to get their input on investment strategies that we could take to meet the state's climate goals. So that's the first mark on this map here on this slide. We also convened an interagency working group at CALSTA that includes staff from Caltrans, the California Transportation Commission, Cal EPA, the California Air Resources Board, and the Department of Finance, as well as the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, the Strategic Growth Council, and the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. So pretty large interagency group working on this effort. And this working group jointly drafted 10 investment strategies to reduce emissions and mitigate the impacts of climate change, shaped by what we heard from our stakeholder engagement. And then we asked stakeholders again for their feedback on the draft investment strategies via a survey. We received 79 responses to that survey, as well as several letters from stakeholders with additional feedback to augment their survey responses. And these stakeholder responses included over 200 action item ideas to implement the executive order, as well as over 150 additional comments and suggestions regarding our investment framework and approach. So we really have a lot of ideas to consider here. Then a month later, on September 23rd, 2020, Governor Newsom signed Executive Order N7920, which put a spotlight on the importance of current activities tied to Executive Order N1919 and established a date certain to finalize the action plan. In October, CALSTA held a half-day-long virtual public workshop that some of you participated in to help refine our direction on potential strategies and actions. This workshop was followed by a public presentation at the Joint CARB CTC HCB meeting on November 4th, where additional stakeholder feedback was presented. We've taken all of the input we received from these engagement opportunities into account, and we are creating the draft action plan that we plan to release in March. Once the draft action plan is released, we will open up for public comment for 30 days, and then we'll hold another stakeholder workshop at that time. We are also planning to bring the draft plan back to the joint CARB CTC HCD meeting in April, and then present the final plan for adoption at the June CTC meeting. The final action plan must be submitted to the governor and the legislature by July 15th, 2021, which is the deadline provided in Executive Order N7920. Next slide, please. I'd like to give a summary of some of the stakeholder feedback that we've heard over the past year or so as we've worked to develop the investment strategies. So we've heard that it's really important to increase investments in active transportation and to conduct meaningful community engagement and work toward a clean freight future. We're also advancing actions to help transit agencies recover, which I realize may not be as relevant to this group, but certainly another sector of the transportation industry that needs assistance and will help us meet our climate goals. We are aligning funding program requirements to match our climate ambition, working within the existing frameworks of SB1. And finding pathways to lift up rural projects, which we understand don't always receive the same attention as some of the projects in the larger urban centers. We've also heard that we should fast track sustainable transportation projects that are currently in the planning phase to help realize these goals sooner than we otherwise might through the normal process. And then also consider how to address local commitments and priorities that may not align with state priorities. We understand that there are certain projects that have already been committed to and certain funding sources that are tied to certain projects, and we need to consider how to address those. And lastly, balancing local context and needs with standardized approaches. So lots of stakeholder feedback that we're taking into account. Next slide, please. All of this feedback has influenced the draft investment framework, which I mentioned previously, and that centers around 10 strategies. The investment framework sets the stage for what our transportation investments should look like in order to achieve the goals of Executive Orders N1919 and N7920, and the actions outlined in the plan will help make this framework a reality. These 10 investment strategies were developed in support of SB1's Fix It First approach and generally within existing funding frameworks. And I will go into a little more detail on those 10 investment strategies on the next two slides. So please go to the next slide. So 3 of the investment strategies are specifically called out in Executive Order N7920. And these are focused around expanding clean transportation options. They include building an integrated statewide rail and transit network to provide seamless, affordable multimodal travel options for all, incorporating safe and accessible infrastructure into projects to support bicycle and pedestrian options, particularly in low-income and disadvantaged communities, and supporting light, medium, and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles and infrastructure. Next slide, please. The other 7 investment strategies that you see here will help us meet the objectives of Executive Order N1919, and as we have heard from stakeholder feedback, are also important to meet our climate goals. These include reducing public health harms and maximizing benefits to disproportionately impacted disadvantaged communities, making safety improvements to reduce fatalities and severe injuries, assessing physical climate risk, promoting projects that do not increase passenger vehicle travel, promoting compact infill development, developing a zero-emission freight transportation system, and protecting natural and working lands. So now we have a little bit better idea of those investment strategies that are going into the action plan, and I'd like to hand it back over to Darwin. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Avital, for running through that. I'll spend some time digging a little bit deeper into our approach on the plan itself. So as Avital laid out, we're using those 10 guiding principles to frame the document, and then from there we're developing specific strategies and actions that will help us implement this work. And the areas of focus for the actions are the ones listed here. We're really intending to look across the entire project delivery process, and it's important to note that although we're talking about investments here at the end of the day, that we really believe that to influence those investments, it's not just about the programming decisions and what projects are chosen, but starts at planning and creating a good pipeline of projects that help meet our goals. So that's why we're taking a much broader approach than just focusing on programming. In terms of some of the specific things that we will touch on in the action plan, we're hoping to have actions that incorporate these following approaches. So first is there'll be actions that align planning initiatives with the CAPTI framework. So this could include things like the California Freight Mobility Plan, for example. We'll be suggesting updates to program guidelines to strengthen alignment with the CAPTI framework and climate goals. So working with the California Transportation Commission to figure out what potential improvements we can suggest related to the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. We'll be improving existing agency processes and practices to remove barriers and accelerate climate action. So this is really about looking at how we do business now and figuring out what types of administrative barriers or process barriers might exist that we can help streamline. And then we're also interested in a limited and targeted fashion pursuing authority for new initiatives if they're appropriate. And then finally, but very importantly, we'll be looking at supportive and coordinating actions led by other sectors that are critical for the plan's success. So a lot of this work is so cross-sectoral and will take actions from folks outside of CALSA as an agency to really help us move the needle. With that, I just wanted to highlight some potential actions that are relevant to this group that are under consideration. So one area, both of these I just mentioned, but one area that we're really interested in is looking at how we can further mainstream zero-emission vehicle infrastructure as a component of Trade Corridor Enhancement Program projects. So this would very much be, this is not about funding kind of standalone ZEV projects that don't bring other freight benefits in the program, but really about how do you take projects with freight benefits that would otherwise be eligible within the TSEP program and incorporate zero-emission vehicle infrastructure into the project scoping and decision making to help bring zero-emission freight to fruition. So that's something we're looking into and working with the CTC on. The next item, very much related, is about in addition to the programming action, looking at incorporating these types of infrastructure needs within the California Freight Mobility Plan, so that our planning efforts are also reflecting the need for these types of investments. So with that overview, just wanted to take this time to give this update to you all, but there'll be plenty of opportunity for deeper conversations and feedback in the coming months. So the draft plan, as I mentioned, is not yet public. It'll be going public at the beginning of March of this year. Will be followed by a 30-day comment period. So you'll have an opportunity to provide us with detailed feedback on that plan. And there'll also be a public workshop held in mid-March to gather further feedback. And we hope to have the plan finalized by the date mentioned in EO 7920, or given to us by the governor, which is July 15th of 2021. So with that, I guess I will stop sharing my screen here and see if there are any questions.
I am seeing lots of questions pop up in the chat. I think because folks are having trouble with the raised hand, we're getting some.
On my end, I also see a couple raised hands.
Chat function is a little tricky. Okay, yes, I see them too. Carrie Cartwright, do you want to unmute and ask the first question?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Carrie Cartwright, Director of GISMO with Port of Los Angeles. I know, Jeannie, we haven't had a chance to meet yet, but hopefully eventually we can, and all CFAC members can meet with you and engage, I think, more proactively. I didn't have a question, but I wanted to make a sort of a general comment related to, obviously, the executive orders, the CAPT, and how Caltrans and STA will move forward. And it relates to the TSIP program, too. There was a few, I would say, disconcerting comments in December at the approval of the TSIP program regarding roadway projects, whether they're highway or arterial street projects, and frankly, many of them are on the state highway system. And they relate to induced VMT, induced volumes. And I think we really would request support from Caltrans and STA moving forward to, I think, to educate the CTC, NGOs, and frankly, any opponents to these critical highway projects, which are bottleneck relief projects. They're not highway widening, growth-inducing projects, and I can attest to that for many years of working on these types of projects, as Caltrans can. And so I hope that we can do that collaboratively to ensure that for the next TSIP round, we also have approval of these critical bottleneck projects, such as the SR 5760, which is moving forward. We have an interchange project on the State Route 47, and there's more, including probably the most important critical goods movement project that the state can be involved in, that being the I-710 corridor, which has been in the works for 20 years, as I can attest to personally. And we hope that LA Metro and Caltrans can overcome some of the air quality issues with EPA and the new administration to hopefully obtain a record of decision in the coming months. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide some input on this. And again, I hope that STA and Caltrans, we all can have a collective dialogue because we are concerned about those comments made moving forward, and even concerned about the possible allocations that'll come up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that, Darwin?
Sure, I can start off, and feel free to add. But Terry, thank you for your comments. I'll start off by saying that in our approach, at least for CAPTI and the actions we're putting forward, we've recognized the difference and the difference in need of, say, additional capacity for the sake of freight movement versus for passenger vehicles, and the document does specifically call out the need to curb potential induced travel from passenger vehicles, but does not make the same claim regarding freight, and that was intentional. And so we will continue to support projects that help improve freight movement I think part of what we can do, and what I'm interested in and looking into, that I think would benefit all of us and would help just provide, I guess, more of an understanding by folks as to what a specific project's outcomes would look like, is getting a little bit more sophisticated with how we analyze travel impacts of projects, to be able to both clearly show that freight benefit that you're talking about, and also, from my perspective, just as importantly from a climate perspective, show the potential induced travel that comes from that project, or lack thereof, to your point, in some of these projects that are very much kind of could be port oriented and very much just moving freight travel, and not have passenger vehicle VMT impacts that are that great or that major. So yeah, I agree that there's a lot of educating and informing we can do on those fronts, and that's something we're definitely interested in. I know Jeannie's team, some of the work that they're doing on coming up with tools and whatnot, are interested in looking further into as well.
May I add one more comment, just for fun?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll be real quick, sorry, because I think this is an important issue. So yeah, obviously the bottleneck relief and safety, obviously these projects have huge safety benefits, and consequently they all have huge emission reduction benefits. And just to state that us traffic engineers working with Caltrans span an enormous amount of time on ensuring that these calculations of emission reductions, the outcomes, are accurate and precise, despite sort of I think the mistrust by many out there about the efficacy of these projects. And just because we're working on a highway project doesn't mean, and traffic engineers, doesn't mean we don't want greenhouse gas reductions, and obviously doing what we can for climate change. So
thank you for the comments, Carrie. We look forward to working with you more on those going forward. I don't have much to add to what Darwin said. I think we're just we're looking to be more sophisticated in our analysis tools, and also in the solutions that we're considering. But we absolutely recognize the need in those corridors, and we're committed to continuing to work with you on that. So thank you for the comments.
Yeah, thank you.
I see another hand from Mark Perry. Mark, are you able to unmute?
I am, and there we go. Hi, this is Mark Perry with the California Energy Commission, and the new governor's budget is going to have more than $1 billion over the next few years for zero-emission transportation funding for infrastructure, such as chargers and hydrogen stations. And I was reading through the CAPD really quick on not the report, but what you've just just shown today, and I'm just wanting to see if there's anything that we can do to assist CalSTA and Caltrans, other than in addition to what we've been doing with the freight mobility plan and the other one that just escapes my mind right now. But if there's anything that we can help you do with for that.
Great, thank you, Mark, for that offer, and we'll very much take you up on that offer. I think part of what CAPDI will lay out is a high-level framework for where we want to go, and there'll be a lot of conversations that then need to happen there in terms of, for example, when we look at the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program and wanting to incorporate more zero-emission vehicle infrastructure within those projects. I think it would be great to come up with strategies on how to connect applicants who are maybe working on traditional highway projects with folks who have an understanding of the zero emission vehicle infrastructure needs and what projects are planned, and essentially help connect those pieces together for folks. And in my mind, you all can play a key role in that. So that's somewhere in particular that I think we're very interested in working with you all on in the coming months.
Excellent. And the other one was the Sustainable Freight Action Plan. That was the one that would skip my mind.
That one's definitely important. Thank you, Mark. So I don't see any other hands. I did see one question in the chat. I'm trying to get back to it. This may just be a quick question, but Rob Ball asked, does promotion of zero emission technology include near zero, such as renewable natural gas? The answer for that one, Darwin? Or thought?
Good question, Rob. So, in terms of, I guess it depends exactly what component we're talking about. So, the governor's executive order 7920 is specifically about getting to or promoting zero emission vehicles, not near zero. Our effort isn't about the vehicles themselves. Our effort here is really about the supporting infrastructure. And so when we're responding to that executive order, we're talking about infrastructure purely for zero emission vehicles, not near zero. That's not to say that there aren't other, natural gas related initiatives, elsewhere in the administration. Folks at CEC can probably better answer that question. But our effort here is very much about electric vehicle charging infrastructure and hydrogen fueling stations in particular.
All right, I see one more hand, and then maybe I'm going to try to move us on to a quick break. Our colleague at CTC, Mitch, has a question. Mitch, can you unmute yourself? Maybe I can unmute you. Looks like you're still muted, Mitch.
Okay, now I can unmute.
There
Thank
you are.
So I have a related question. So given that you mentioned the executive order and the push to zero emission vehicles, does CalSTA believe that this puts a greater emphasis on the need to move to a road charge? And what does CalSTA see as the timeline to implement a road charge?
Good question, Mitch. I believe that CalSTA has been, even prior to this executive order coming out, obviously, as you know, supportive of implementing a road charge and looking at a pathway to get there. In terms of whether or not this kind of speeds up that timeline, I think my response to that would be that it helps provide some clearer markers for us to do analysis on, to understand what that timeline looks like, right? So it helps define that timeline, which I think can be a really important tool in helping move forward the road charge program, because now we can do specific analysis on, okay, what does the fleet mix look like at a certain year based on what these new goals are, and it does potentially shift up the timeline as well. And so I think that can make a good basis for putting together a strategy of what are the right timing milestones to hit to get to a road charge program. In terms of what that timeline actually is and how quickly we're moving on road charge, it's not my area of expertise, so I don't want to comment on that. But happy to circle back with Lori Pepper in particular from our team to chat with her a little bit more on how she's thinking about 7920 influencing CalSTA's stance on timing for a road charge program. But short answer to your question, yes, this obviously very much influences that conversation.
So we got two more related questions in the chat, but I want to try to move us off of this item. Both of the questions are related to funding of zero emission vehicle charging infrastructure through programs like the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, TSIP. Because the CTC plays an important role in that program, and I think they should in part help us answer that question. I want to maybe take that one offline and follow up with the folks that asked the question after the meeting. And since we were scheduled to take a quick break at this time, I want to go ahead and give you all the break since we're going to have you online for a long time this morning. We had scheduled to take a 10-minute break. I want to just make it a little bit less than 10 minutes and ask you to come back at 9:35. That's okay. We'll try to get ourselves back on the scheduled agenda in the next item. So thank you, Darwin and Avital, for talking about CAPDI and answering a bunch of questions. And we'll see you all back in at 9:35.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Just want to welcome people back from the break. And our agenda item is from Renaud and Eric Fredericks, where they're going to be talking about the California Freight Mobility Plan implementation and our work plan. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlon. Good morning, everyone. This is Jeff Morneau, and I am the branch chief of the Freight Planning Branch in the Office of Freight Planning in the Division of Transportation Planning at Caltrans. And I'm going to be here with Eric Fredericks, and we're going to be presenting the California Freight Mobility Plan 2020 implementation and the Freight Planning Work Plan. We're going to be presenting some major studies and plans that the Office of Freight Planning is currently pursuing. And we want to ask for your feedback on these efforts. We're going to be using Poll Everywhere. So it's going to be an interactive exercise, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. So let's kick things off. First, I'd like to talk about the Freight Float Program work plan. So as you know, the California Freight Mobility Plan was finished in 2020, and we are currently working on implementing the CFMP. So one of the main mechanisms in which we are implementing the CFMP is through a freight program work plan. So this is a work plan that we created within OFP, and we also work with our partners in creating this plan. It's a 5-year work plan. It outlines major work activities and deliverables statewide that will be conducted by headquarters and the districts. The plans, studies, and activities that are outlined in the work plan will help inform and provide the findings and materials for the CFMP 2025 update. One thing I want to emphasize is that the 5-year work plan really outlines and really shows or emphasizes that we will be working with our partners. It's going to have continuous engagement with our public and private partners and stakeholders. And that includes the CFAC, the regional freight committees, districts. We'll also be conducting outreach to urban and rural communities, disadvantaged and disproportionately affected and vulnerable communities. And also it's going to involve Native American tribal outreach. So we will be, over the next 5 years, we will be engaging several of our partners, and that feedback will help us complete many of the activities, plans, and studies that are identified in the work plan. So how was the work plan created? Well, we took all of the action items from the CSFAP and the strategies from the CFMP, and we created a survey. And this survey asked what our partners' freight priorities are. So we sent this freight priority survey to the districts, to the CFAC, to external stakeholders, to partner state agencies, and also to the Rural Counties Task Force. And they provided us several important points of feedback. Some points that the districts provided us were that the most important things to them were that we should focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions by way of reducing bottlenecks and improving rail infrastructure. And also, districts also requested grant writing training to help them apply for freight improvement funds. Respondents also, the districts agreed that acquiring more freight information would be extremely helpful, possibly with a freight fact book. So the districts would really like to see more freight information. The CFAC and partner agencies also provided us several important points of feedback as well. Our stakeholders, our external stakeholders were most interested in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and ensuring adequate support for the ports. And also our external stakeholders suggested prioritizing freight projects by how well they align with Executive Order 1919. And finally, our external partners emphasized that there needs to be a stronger link between freight projects and land use issues. And finally, we also asked the RCTF, the Rural Counties Task Force, for their input as well. And they were most concerned with aspects of freight that are related to safety. So such as the adequate maintenance of main highways, development of alternative routes for emergency freight, and development of freight-only lanes and routes to prevent unsafe passing and congestion. The RCTF also reported that some roads in rural areas are not meeting minimum safety standards. And also the RCTF wanted us to look at a more a more resilient system for the freight network that can respond to and recover from emergency road closures and natural disasters. So everyone who we distributed the survey to gave us a lot of great feedback, and we incorporated that feedback into the freight work plan. So what does the freight work plan call for? Well, it's pretty much split into two parts. The freight work plan calls for year-round efforts to implement the CFMP, and some main points are continuous outreach and engagement, like I mentioned earlier. The continuation of freight advisory committees like this one, but also a call for the creation of regional freight committees. Also, we are going to have continuous legislation analysis. And finally, we want to have continuous coordination, both internally within Caltrans, but also externally, and with the CTC agencies and partners. What are some major deliverables that are outlined in the freight work plan that will help inform the next update of the CFMP? Some of those plans and studies include the agricultural goods movement plan, the statewide truck parking study, the M580 study, the warehousing study, and the freight resilience plan. And there are many others actually that I'm not mentioning. Completion of these studies are dependent on resources available. But I can tell you that all of these studies are in various stages of development right now. So that kind of leads me into some of the major studies that Eric and I are working on. The first one I wanted to mention, or that I wanted to talk to you about, was the agricultural goods movement study. So, as all of you know, agriculture is a major sector in the state of California. Agriculture is so important that there's actually a goal and a strategy just in the CFMP 2020 that specifically talks about agriculture. Under CFMP Goal 2, Economic Prosperity, it has the following strategy, which is to identify the needs and gaps of the agricultural goods movement system to improve the safe and efficient movement of agricultural goods to, from, and through California. So the freight work plan calls for the creation of an agricultural goods movement study in order to meet this strategy. And the main objectives that we've identified so far for the agricultural goods movement study are that we need to identify a critical network of routes used for agricultural goods movement throughout California. And this study also needs to identify the needs, gaps, projects, and recommendations that can help make a resilient agricultural goods movement system. There are several completed and also concurrent agricultural goods movement efforts going on so far. There are numerous regional studies at the MPO levels throughout California that look at agricultural goods movement. Caltrans just completed recently a agricultural goods movement system assessment preliminary investigation. And this preliminary investigation looked at current efforts and future plans in regards to ag goods movement, challenges and effective practices in terms of ag goods movement planning, and also funding. One really important report that I wanted to call out that came out recently was the importance of highways to U.S. agriculture. And this was produced by the United States Department of Agriculture. It came out recently. It really provides a good overview of agriculture throughout the entire country. And just a few brief bullet points, some findings from that study are that in 2018, 4.5 billion tons of agricultural products worth $3.1 trillion were moved across all transportation modes. Trucks account for 83% of agricultural freight movements by tonnage and 88% by market value. Trucks account for 56% of agricultural freight ton miles, particularly due to the key role of rail and waterway roads for transporting grains over longer distances. And this study also identifies several major agricultural corridors throughout the country. Their first corridor that they identified is Interstate 5, State Route 99, as a major agricultural corridor. So I encourage all of you to look at that study. It's very informative. So this is an opportunity for you to participate. We definitely want to ask the CFAC some questions regarding the studies that we're going to present during this agenda item. So for the agricultural goods movement study, I wanted to have a poll everywhere, and I encourage everyone to participate. All you have to do is you text to the number 22333. You text the word freight planning, no spaces, to the number 22333. And you can actually put in your answer, and it should show up on the screen. So the first question is, what are your region's greatest challenges in terms of agricultural goods movement? And you should be able to type in an answer on your cell phone, and it should show up on the screen. So first you need to type freight planning to the number 22333. I'm happy to see that there's already a few answers showing up on the screen, which is great. So some challenges that have been identified are shoulders, delays, COVID, obviously referring to the pandemic, real challenges, and congestion. Congestion is turning into the biggest thing, and delays. Rail, border, warehousing. I'm glad someone brought up warehousing because we'll be talking about that soon. Connectivity, adequate something. So I think we'll keep this open just for a few more seconds, and then we'll go on to the next slide. So I encourage everyone to just type in their responses as soon as they can. I'm starting
Jeff,
to see some individual.
It looks like, does
Yeah.
it split if you put in multiple words, does it split it into, looks like just one word shows up at a time?
Yeah, that's correct, Jeannie.
Okay, that's interesting. I wonder if we have a minute to just, if anybody wants to actually unmute and expand on their comment. Now we're trying to get back on the agenda. Delays is clearly the most popular. Rail is getting to be a big one. Does anybody want to chime in and actually just speak to their comment, since the one word comment is kind of limited?
Yeah, this is Mark Perry at the California Energy Commission.
Mark.
I'm not really involved in the in goods movement, agricultural good movements myself as a professional, but as personal, having driven I-5 and I-99 on several occasions down to Southern California, I've noticed that the main one of the main things is there's only one main connection between I-5 and I-99 going down the entire Central Valley. The rest are 2-lane roads that go through stop signs, agricultural areas. And it's kind of, and a lot of the times those get delays because there's been a head-on collision or there's been accidents out there. And they meet up 5 and 99 down in Bakersfield, and then once again up in Stockton. And that's the only places where there's really a cross-town freeway to get to either one. And again, like you have the rail that goes up and down 99, but it doesn't go up 5 either. So there's another getting coordination and getting stuff to the rail cars.
Thank you, Mark. Great comments.
Jeannie, we got another great chat from Rob Ball from KernCog. Can I unmute him next?
Sure.
Okay, Rob, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I just had a comment. In our last goods movement plan, we left out I-40 as from the plan as a key route. But in that recent ag study for agricultural goods movement nationally, I-40 58 corridor connecting to the location there near where I-5 and 99 meet is considered a nationally significant corridor. And so my question was, when we go back and revisit that plan here within the next 3 years or so, if we would add I-40 to that plan.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, this is Jeff again. You will definitely be conducting a route analysis for the next CFMP update. I think you'll have an opportunity to make that point. And another opportunity is the ITSP update. I think that's another opportunity where we could look at that route as well. And that's going to be presented in a bit, actually.
Thank you, Jeff. And Rob, I see
Thanks.
2 more hands. I wonder if at the same time we want to jump to the next. I know you've got another poll everywhere.
Yeah,
so
actually, I'm thinking we should move on. Let's get to the next question here. Thank you, everyone, for your responses. So the next question is, what would be important to include or address in a statewide agricultural goods movement study? And since all of you are already connected with your phones, this should be a little faster, I think.
And maybe I'll invite Carrie, since you have your hand up again, if you want to jump in. And Mitch, I see you also have your hand. I don't know if that's a new hand or old hand, but we'll let Carrie go first. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was a little inept in the joining the text effort here. Just quickly on some of the issues regarding agricultural movement that's actually pertinent to the ports is transload facilities, which entail moving domestic agricultural products such as hay or grains that are then transferred to marine containers for export near the ports or somewhere inland. We've had some issues where we didn't have enough space to provide for some of these new transload facilities, and there's generally and typically opposition to expansion of existing transload facilities of these agricultural products that are located adjacent to the port. So I think when you look into this for your overall CFMP update and CTP and the agricultural study is look into this, and we can work with you on maybe some policy statements of trying to work to encourage maybe municipalities to collaborate for these types of facilities, which are important for obviously the economy of export. And so that's a comment I'd like to make. And then also on the what's important to address in the study is something that we've encountered, and as you know, we've been sort of partnering with you and Rob Ball and others on some short haul rail studies in Central Valley for agricultural products. Is really trying to accurately identify the market segments with useful, good data on truck movements along the 5 and 99. So I've had discussions with Yachtman Quanta technology applications to get better market data to verify some of the macro level commodity data. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Great.
Gary. Great points. It makes me think we should have a discussion also about our rail plan at a future CFAC meeting, since there's a lot of rail seems to be a high priority for a lot of folks here. So that should definitely be an item for a future discussion. Any other comments? Looks like I don't see any other hands, but lots of good input coming in on the chat. Jeff, maybe I'll hand it back to you to
Thank you, Jeannie.
take us to our next item. Thank you.
I just want
thank
to
you so
know
much.
before you go on, to everyone, make sure you keep your pollev.com address handy, because we're going to be asking a few more questions as we progress.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So let me move on. I know we have a limited amount of time here. So the next study that I wanted to mention was the Caltrans statewide warehousing study that my branch is working on. And there's been an expressed need from working groups, stakeholders, and Caltrans management to better understand warehousing in California. Current events, land use, and the market present challenges and opportunities that require Caltrans and other state agencies to focus resources in meaningful and cooperative ways. So we want to present this presentation. We want to talk about what we're pursuing here, and also to gather your feedback through another poll everywhere at the end of this presentation. So there has been a lot of previous studies and plans regarding warehousing throughout California. Many of them have been at the regional level, such as the SCAG Last Mile Freight Study, the San Joaquin COG Warehousing Study, KernCog Inland Port Feasibility Analysis, and the Northern California Mega Region Goods Movement Study by NTC. We also talk about warehousing in the CFMP and the CSFAP at a statewide level. Finally, there are a few national studies as well. Warehousing is talked about in the National Freight Strategic Plan, and also a few other studies from the private sector. So warehousing is a very important part of the freight system, and we really want to understand what's going on regarding warehousing at a statewide level. So my branch has actually reached out to several partners throughout the state, and we've been conducting interviews with regional and local partners and Caltrans districts to understand what the status of warehousing is in the state and what they would like to see in a statewide warehousing study. We've spoken to Rob Ball at KernCog, and SCAG, SANDAG, and San Joaquin COG, and also Caltrans staff at several districts. And all of our partners have provided us a lot of great feedback. There's been they've expressed the need to assess existing and projecting warehousing trends. So some of the things that we're considering looking at in a statewide warehousing study is existing and projected warehousing. And that would include the location of existing and projected warehousing, future sites, the total square feet of warehousing space now and in the future, Also, maybe seasonality and vacancy rates. We were also told by our partners that we should look at economic competitiveness, such as factors that define the viability of warehousing, the effect of regulations on warehousing, real estate and land use factors, and the cost of doing business in the state of California. We've also gained some feedback on warehousing trends that we should look at, and that includes VMT generation from warehousing, greenhouse gas emissions, shifts in warehousing growth and relocations. How does e-commerce, how is that going to affect warehousing in the future? Inland ports, intermodal warehousing centers, and transloading, proximity to fleet yards, urban versus rural trends in regards to warehousing. We were also told we should look at the warehousing workforce, including employment numbers, the workers per square foot, and also housing issues and trends. And finally, we were told by our partners that we should look at several trends regarding technology, such as sustainable tech, zero emission and near zero emission technologies, and how will that affect warehousing? How will alternative transportation modes affect warehousing? Automation is something that we should look at regarding warehousing, and also last mile considerations. So this is another opportunity for you to provide your feedback on what we should look at in terms of a statewide warehousing study. And my first question is, what would be important to include or look at in a statewide warehousing study? So if you could provide your answers, we would really appreciate it. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we could talk about that at the same time.
Just looking at time too, I know we're a little bit behind our agenda, so maybe we want to take about 5 more minutes on this item and then move to the next one. I don't see any answers coming in. Is the poll EV working?
Yeah, it's a little, I'm not sure what's going on. It could be we're getting answers on the back end, but maybe they're not showing on the screen. And this has happened before, I don't know why. But if everyone can just submit their answers, we'd really appreciate it. Maybe we'll just spend like 5 more seconds on this.
Sounds good. And I do see a couple of hands. Zarin Jefferson? Ron Jefferson? May have said that wrong. Sorry. Do you want to unmute?
Okay, yes, I was one of the examples that would be good for the warehouse is to look at Amazon. Amazon is dominating the warehouse industry now. They're building more warehouse facilities than anyone across the country right now. So that would be a good example to look at, to maybe include in the in the warehousing study. You could probably get some good information from that. So that's just one of the examples that I would like to share with you guys.
Yeah, thank you. And what I imagine is that we will probably reach out not only to partners in the public sector, but also the private sector in order to understand warehousing needs and issues. And Amazon may be one of those. So let me move to the next slide. Hopefully this works. What is your agency's top concern with warehousing in your region? So if you could type those, and hopefully they'll show up on the screen.
Thanks, Jeff. And I see a couple more hands while folks are entering their responses. Catherine Garrison, do you want to unmute and make your comment?
Good morning. Catherine Garrison
Morning.
with the California Air Resources Board. I wanted to say that we've been following what the South Coast Air Quality Management District has been doing with regards to their warehouse rulemaking effort, the indirect source rule. And they seem to have been finding there's interesting where a refrigeration subsector is different than others freight. So just sharing that, it would be good to know more about that and know if there's different needs and concerns with moving refrigerated freight versus freight that does not need refrigerated.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. That's something I think we're going to be looking at.
Thank you, Catherine. And I see Tina Backstrom has a hand up. You want to unmute yourself?
Hi. I was wondering, in looking at the PR 2305 and the effects of the new warehousing requirements and regulations that may come into effect soon, once the study comes into place, really looking at the effects of that new requirement on the warehousing industry would be very interesting. That's all.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm not familiar with that regulation. Do you know what that is? ER 2305?
Sorry, PR, P as in Peter, R 2305. It's a new proposed rule that's going to be going into effect, that may be going into effect soon from CARB. I'm actually reading it right now. I have a meeting on it this afternoon. But basically it's looking at imposing, it's a reporting requirement for warehouse operators and owners that are, if you have over 100,000 square feet, there's a new type of reporting and fee associated with that type of operation, and that's to help with the reduction of the emissions in the area. So that's something that it's going to be very interesting once that comes into effect. What the actual effects are on the industry.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. And I think regulations is something we'll be looking at in the study.
Okay, thank you.
I think we've got a lot of great feedback here. And if you have any more feedback, feel free to email me. But I do want to move this on to the next plan that we're going to talk about. And that is the Freight Resiliency Plan. And Eric Fredericks will be presenting this plan. So I'm going to pass it on to Eric.
Good morning, everyone. Next, you can go to the next slide, Jeff. Thanks. So just wanted to go over our scope of work that we've been drafting for the Freight Resilience Plan. And really wanted to talk about the purpose and vision. And this comes from a variety of plans, the Sustainable Freight Action Plan and the Freight Mobility Plan, both called on actions to look more closely at how we can improve the resilience of the freight sector. So we really want the freight sector to be able to prepare, absorb, respond, and adapt to freight multimodal disruptions to the network. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about the objectives, methodology, and the schedule and deliverables. And apologies, I'm going to be looking at another screen here. So if I'm, that's why I'm looking off to the side. So we're looking to, as mentioned, mitigate the supply chain disruptions, educate stakeholders on the need for resilience planning, identify communication across entities and identify those responsible for responding to disruptions, kind of building on what we've been doing during COVID and wildfires, and I'll get to that in a moment, and maintaining, enhancing resilience practices, and help to guide transportation investments to minimize economic impacts from disruptions. So the type of disruptions we're going to be looking at are both weather events, extreme weather events, human activity, and geophysical events. So on extreme weather events, things like wildfires, wind, public safety, power shutoff, storm surge, flooding, snow events. For human activity, obviously COVID, pandemic, those type of things, but also cybersecurity, potential civil unrest events. And then geophysical, primarily it'd be earthquakes, but things like that. It could even be volcanic explosion, not as much for us, but it could be affected by things in the Pacific Northwest too. So next slide, Jeff. So some of these you may already be kind of familiar with. So one of the main deliverables that we're going to focus on is the plan itself, which will have case studies, lessons learned, strategies, common barriers, and tools for a wide range of audiences. And then hopefully information tailored to the stakeholders affected by disruptions. One of the things we also want to develop is a course of action. So that's a living, actionable guide for how we respond to disruptions and identify those who are critical to communicating kind of from the state level up to the Governor's Office of Emergency Management during events, and Caltrans Department Operations Center gets activated. And many of you have already been helping us with those efforts. So we want to expand on that through our operations email list and make it, we've been doing some stakeholder interviews already. And one of the things we've been hearing time and time again is that information needs to get especially to the truck drivers in their cab. And maybe the state isn't necessarily going to be able to get that information directly, but we could work with regional partners to maybe get that information to fleets and such, and find a way that's not overwhelming, that you're not getting every single event going on, but maybe some of those major ones that will affect the freight industry, like a slide that closes a major freight route. We're doing a lot of literature review, although we're finding a lot of it is not specific enough to California. We have quite a lot more challenges, I think, than other states and regions face, and we have the largest gateway of port activity in the country, so no one can really relate to us on that front, but we are pulling from other states like Texas, Wyoming, that have done resilience in Washington. And we're doing a lot of stakeholder interviews because that's the only way that we're going to really get down to into the weeds on how it's actually happening for things like wildfire response and that. So we've already been working with our districts, interviewing operational staff and such, and a lot of regional agencies and some actual drivers and companies, and we want to do a lot more, and we need your help with that. Well, and I should mention that we're doing this in-house, so we definitely could use the help of CFAC. So next slide, Jeff. So we wanted to get a little bit more input on things like obstacles with making freight more resilient. So go ahead and use the freight planning link for PullEV and help us out with sharing some of your biggest obstacles. A few coming in: marketplace understanding, costs, lack of ZEV infrastructure. And that's something that we've been hearing too, is as we move to zero emission, making sure that it's resilient in times of power outages, say public safety power shutoffs or wildfires, sea level rise. One thing that we also know that even events, say like a hurricane off the coast of Mexico, can have quite effects on our ports through storm surge. So things of that nature, and making those aware that we even experience some of those impacts. So leave it open for a few more seconds, and then we can move on to the next. Really great comments here. Okay, Jeff, I think we could probably move on.
I see one hand from Catherine Garrison. Catherine, is that a new hand, or is that from the last discussion? If it's new, go ahead and unmute. We move on. No, she took the hand down. Eric,
Okay.
do you want to give any context for this question?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, sometimes it's a little tough for Caltrans to reach out to our partners that, say, in the private sector in particular, that may not want to necessarily share information. So we would really appreciate even some agencies identified in particular that we need to reach out to make sure that we're covering all of our bases and help build that connection, because communication is key during this. So thank you. We're already reaching out to some of the entities here already, and so we're trying to connect with Cal OES. We've been we've had to BNSF ASAP. I like that. One great thing, we're also working on a freight resilience workshop with TRB, and that's coming up in April. So I encourage you all to attend that workshop. You can go on the TRB website to find it. And we actually will have a speaker from BNSF speaking about freight resilience, as well as Union Pacific. We're going to have a panel on Western wildfires. So I'll be speaking about some of the Caltrans efforts on that, and UP will be speaking, as well as Colorado DOT. This is great. And if you have specific connections that you could send to, you can contact me, and making introductions would be really helpful. So appreciate it.
Eric, just watching the time, we're about 15 minutes behind the agenda, so maybe we should jump to our next item and
Yep,
follow
sure.
up with folks to get some more specific input on this question.
Yeah, and I think we could probably skip this one.
Okay.
It's probably a little
We'll
bit
skip this one.
redundant. So I think we'll be on to the next item.
Thank you so much, Eric and Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Great updates, and thanks to all for the input. So next we've got Marlon Flournoy, our Division Chief in Transportation Planning, who's going to talk about the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, and we'll take a break after this item, so we're just going to move the break a little bit later, but we'll try to get back on track as much as we can. Take it away, Marlon.
All right, thank you, Jeannie. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. And Jeannie, I think we can get us back on track. I don't think our item is going to take as long, so we'll see how we can help here. So I just wanted to provide an update in terms of where we are with the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, or the ITSP. And then sort of following this update, we do have some survey questions that we want to ask just to get some additional input from the group. So feel free to leave the poll anywhere up on your screens. So having said that, just to provide a little bit of context for the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, this is a plan that's really going to help provide a framework in terms of providing guidance in terms of how we're prioritizing projects that we want to move forward for project selection. And early on, sort of when a plan was initially released back in 1998, it did really emphasize the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program, which is a subcomponent of the STIP, State Transportation Improvement Program. And as we've been becoming a little bit more mature in the development of these plans, we've broadened our focus and we're making it a little bit more funding agnostic. So we're looking at a whole breadth of different fund sources to move forward projects that have interregional significance. The plan focuses on interregional corridors, strategic interregional corridors, and so these are basically major interregional connections between regions. So we know each of the regions is doing planning within their respective areas, and what we're really trying to focus in on is how to make those connections in between the regions and throughout the state. And the plan also within each strategic corridor, we're looking at priority interregional facilities. So these may be key rail, highway facilities, that have significance. So just to get you a little bit oriented if you're not familiar with the ITSP. So this plan is going to be focusing in on our 2021 update, and we are aligning the plan with the California Transportation Plan 2050, which I'll be providing an update a little bit later in the agenda. You already heard Darwin and Avital talk about the CAPT effort. So we want to make sure that there's alignment with the framework that's being articulated through that. And just as important, we want to ensure that the ITSP is consistent with our other modal plans, such as the California Rail Plan, but also the California Freight Mobility Plan. So those are all important, plans that we want to make sure that we're, being internally consistent with. Just briefly speaking, wanted to provide just a quick update on some of the workshops that we held between November and December. We held 3 workshops which focused on North, Central, and Southern California. Between the 3 workshops, we had about 113 external stakeholders that participated. We had stakeholders at the federal level, at the state level, other state agencies participating, as well as the regions, a lot of MPO participation. We had rail and transit agencies, cities and counties. We had a tribe that participated, as well as advocacy groups. So we had a really good cross-section of different stakeholders that participated in the call. And some of the questions that we've asked at these workshops, really we're talking about, people's thoughts about, in regards to ITSP, the CTP 2050 goals, and how would they sort of prioritize those goals with respect to the ITSP. We also asked about multimodal connectivity and interregional freight concerns, and so we got a lot of good feedback, from the various stakeholders that participated on that call. And our goal here is to today we want to ask you guys a series of questions to get your input to help us in terms of developing this next update for the ITSP. And with the feedback that we're getting from these different forums, we're going to be developing a white paper summarizing all the feedback that we got, and we definitely want to make sure that we're leveraging what we're hearing from these forums as we're developing the plan. And just in terms of continual outreach, you know, on a continuous basis, we are providing updates to the Rural County Task Force, the RTPA group, which meets prior to each of the California Transportation Commission meetings, and also the Native American Advisory Committee. So those groups were providing regular updates, and we also envision providing this group regular updates as well. So having said that, let's jump over to the next slide. And so we want to ask you, I believe there are 5 questions that we want to run through. So the first question here is, what are the highest priority interregional freight needs within your region? And I think some of you got pretty savvy. If you want to use multiple words, you know, maybe using an underscore or a dash, just to make sure that we're capturing all of your thoughts. So again, what are the highest priority interregional freight needs in your region? So we've got ZEV infrastructure, it's important. We have land use. Okay, inland ports, that's great. And we're not going to leave this open for too long. I just want to make sure that we're capturing your comments. All right, great. This is a lot of good feedback. And if anyone wants to maybe elaborate on a thought that you're capturing in the poll anywhere, feel free to raise your hand, and we'd be more than happy to have you give your thoughts on that. So we'll just give it about 30 more seconds here. Parking seems to really be rising to the top. We know that you know, Jeff and Eric had already sort of touched on the truck parking studies, and so those are really important. Bottlenecks, really important to the freight industry. Managed lanes is an interesting one. That's certainly a conversation that we're, you know, having more of a dialogue on. All right. And do we have any hands raised? Okay. All right. So this is good feedback. Really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and jump on the next question if we don't have a hand raised. All right, the second question, which routes or rail facilities are critical to interregional freight movement that should be considered in the ITSP? So this can be ports, highway facilities, rail facilities, airports. Great, so I-5, yep, 15, Low Sand Corridor, 101, 152, Wow, Low Sand's really big, okay. And again, if you want to elaborate on any of the feedback that you're providing, again, feel free to raise your hand and we'll be more than happy to unmute you. Yeah, east-west routes definitely got a lot of discussion during our workshops. All right, yeah, and one of the reasons why we're asking this question is, you know, just from a statewide perspective, you know, obviously there are many different types of facilities within the state, and some of the feedback that we heard from our partners is that, you know, there were key facilities within their respective regions that were left out, and so we want to make sure that you know we're you know, taking the feedback that you guys have, and we want to make sure that it's not lost as we're conducting our analysis and developing the plans. That's one of the reasons why we're asking this question. All right, do we have any hands that are raised? Okay. We'll jump to the next question then. Appreciate that. All right, the third question is, how does your agency or company plan for sustainable interregional freight? So how does your agency company plan for interregional freight, sustainable interregional freight? Yeah, part of the challenge with my apologies for that. Part of the challenge with the with developing a statewide plan is making sure that there's consistency with what the regions are doing. Part of our strategy is making sure that we can identify opportunities for partnership. And so if to the greatest extent possible, if there are certain things that are being done within the regions, the idea is how can we leverage those opportunities and making sure that we're working together. And so that's one of the reasons why we want to ask this question. All right, and again, if you want to raise your hand and provide a little bit more context, more than happy to do so. So I see partner communication, we see collaboration. These are constantly shifting, interregional, my multi-region plans. And that's something that we're starting to think more about, just even from Caltrans perspective. We have a couple of good examples of 2 or 3 different districts working together on corridor plans and making sure that the work that we're doing is all coordinated between each of the regions. And so we're really excited to have that type of work going on. All right, so I see lots of studies, and so maybe that's something that we can look more into. I know, there are a lot of MPOs that are doing a lot of interesting work, so maybe that's something that we can focus a little bit more on, is working with the MPOs to leverage some of the things that they're doing. Okay, great. Let's jump on to the 4th question. We got 2 more here. All right, so so how can planning for interregional freight movement support equity? And so, Jeannie provided a really good overview in terms of our equity efforts within Caltrans. We have a new office within Caltrans that's focusing on equity. I know they're working very hard at building up the program and looking at freight metrics and those sorts of things. And so so how can we plan for interregional freight movement to support equity? And one of the things that
Sorry, Marlon, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, Eric.
I just saw we have a comment. Renewable natural gas is an affordable long-range fuel that disadvantaged communities like the San Joaquin Valley can afford.
Oh, that's a good comment. Yeah, and one of the things that I think about equity as well is, in a lot of cases, whether it's rail or some of the ports, that are adjacent to disadvantaged communities, how can we leverage some of the work that we're doing on freight to improve, some of improve the lives of the, community members that are living in these communities. And so we want to make sure that we're, as we're thinking about how to improve freight, we want to make sure that we're looking at sort of these multi benefits, and jobs certainly is one of them. I know we've had some conversations about, bike and ped infrastructure and just ensuring that, they have, good viable choices to be able to make trips within the community. Warehouse location, that's a really good one. Employment, ZEB infrastructure. Yeah, certainly things that can clean up the air quality in these communities as well. Yeah, so this is a lot of good feedback. Thank you. And then the last question, and jump on over. How is your agency or company preparing for disruptions to the freight sector, such as wildfires, sea level rise, pandemics, economic downturns, etc.? So how is your agency or company preparing for disruptions to the freight sector? Yeah, studies is important because we need to make sure that, you know, we understand the data behind some of these things and understand sort of the underlying reasons. Yeah, and also I recall in the California Freight Mobility Plan, you know, we talked about having a resilient freight network. So, you know, if there are disruptions along a certain route, you know, are there ways to, you know, to divert some of those goods on other routes? And so we talked about a lot about that, some microgrids, adaptation plans. So that's one of the things that Caltrans is working on. I think in the spring, we're going to be finishing up our last set of adaptation plans. And so maybe at our next CFAC meeting, we can talk about some of the work that we're doing on climate change, where we've looked at, you know, different climate stressors, how they're impacting state highway facilities, and the adaptation plans are focusing a little bit more on, you know, which types of facilities should we be focusing and prioritizing. And so maybe we can provide an update. Resiliency, yep, see that. Alternative routes,
Marlon,
that's a good one. Mm-hmm.
I see a hand raised in the participant.
Okay, great. Teresa, I can't see the last name.
Hi there, this is Teresa Davenport of Long Beach. Going back to the previous question 4, I'm glad to see that was part of the set of questions you asked regarding climate. I just wanted to make a comment that the timing of coordination and collaboration with stakeholders, especially in disadvantaged communities, is important. I think there's a tendency to engage during the environmental stage and through some limited workshops, but I think that the earlier that conversations can be fostered with EJ communities, I think the better the project will be developed. I think meeting multiple needs of the community as well as transportation agencies and staff that want to see projects successfully go from planning to implementation.
Yeah, Teresa, I'm really glad that you, you know, brought that up, because that has been something that we've been talking a lot about within Caltrans, and our goal is, you know, when you sort of look at the process for you know, whether it's from planning through project delivery, we want to ensure that we have you know, really robust engagement. And when I say engagement, you know, I think there's a difference between outreach and engagement. You know, in a lot of ways, I think outreach is just you're putting information out there, but what we want to make sure that we're doing is really engaging stakeholders and the public, and getting their feedback, and really taking that information and being able to actually you know, have that informed decision making, whether it's on a corridor plan, whether it's a Caltrans active transportation plan, and really our goal is the work that we're doing in planning, have that drive the types of projects that we're moving forward in our capital process, with the hope being that, as an example, you know, if we're developing a corridor study, or if we're developing you know, an active transportation plan within a certain area, you know, we really want to work hard to form a partnership, you know, with the community, you know, maybe depending on the community, maybe working with advocacy groups to help sort of bridge the gaps. But we do want to basically establish a level of trust, between the Caltrans and various stakeholders. And the idea being is, if a project is coming from a corridor plan, and we're going to start moving that into project delivery, we can make sure that we're continuing that same level of engagement, and the community or the partners understand that they A, understand the project, and B, we've been forming this relationship with them in a way where there's a level of confidence in that we are hearing their concerns. And so, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because that really is our goal. When we're engaging communities during the environmental process, that's too late. I mean, in a lot of ways, all the decisions have been made. And so what we want to make sure is that we're investing that time and energy early in the process. So before we actually scope out a project, we're there listening to them and taking into account the concerns that they have and building that into the project. And then most importantly, going back to them and being able to show our work, show what we've incorporated, and to be able to explain, why we're making certain decisions. So again, really appreciate you bringing that up. All right, so it seems like you guys really had a lot to say. So some of the things that are rising to the top: infrastructure, education, engagement, planning, maintenance. And I think sometimes maintenance doesn't get a ton of attention. I think a lot of times we focus so much on developing a project, constructing it, but how we maintain that infrastructure is really critical. Whether it's culverts, and making sure that we're adequately maintaining those culverts to prevent flooding. I mean, there's all types of strategies that can go into maintaining to actually help keep a facility open and resilient. So really appreciate you guys bringing that up. Okay, I think that's just going to wrap up my section. So again, I really appreciate all the feedback that you guys had, and please plan on getting an update at the next CFAC meeting on the ITSP.
Oh, Marlon, this is Francis.
Yes.
I posted the website in the chat function, and also the email that anyone can reach us at if they have any specific questions for the ITSP team.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. And funny enough, I had a note on that and I forgot to cover that. So yes, if you can go into the chat, as Francis mentioned, our website is there. At our website, you can get information on future workshops. You can submit comments. I think we're going to be providing a survey there. So there's going to be a lot of different resources. There's maps that we have posted. So there's a lot of information about the ITSP if you want to learn more. Thanks, Francis, for that reminder.
All right, Marlon, well, you made up some time. Well done. We are going to take a break next. So we want to give you a 10-minute break. We'll try to make our charter adoption item fairly quick so we can make sure we have enough time for our partners at the end of the agenda. So if you can please return at 10:55, we will break for about 10 minutes and then we'll wrap up the last few items. So see you all at 10:55. It's 10:55, so I want to bring you back from the break. And from here, we're going to move into our discussion of the charter amendments and adoption for CFAC. So Jeff, I think you're going to lead us through this part of the agenda. All right.
Hi, Jeannie. Yes, I am.
Excellent. Okay, I'll pass to you.
All right, everyone, welcome back. This is Jeff Morneau again, and we're going to go over the California Freight Advisory Committee Charter Amendments. So at the last CFAC meeting, Yatman Kwan presented a few charter amendments that we were proposing to amend into the CFAC charter. So I want to briefly go over those three main amendments. The first amendment we proposed was we would delegate the nomination power from the Caltrans director to the Deputy Director of Planning and Mobile Programs. The next amendment was removal of members who have not attended or sent an alternative in his or her place for 5 consecutive meetings. A participation reminder will be sent to the member after 3 consecutive absences. And the final amendment we proposed was to change the frequency of meetings from a quarterly basis to a minimum of 2 per year. And after the last CFAC meeting, we did send out the charter with these 3 proposed amendments, and we asked for your feedback. And we did receive a few comments, which I want to go over in the next slide. So this slide kind of shows 3 important comments that we received and the changes that we made to the charter based on those comments. So one comment we received was we should add some language about economic resilience. So we actually took that comment and we went beyond it, and we included some language in the charter about resiliency in general. So we included in the charter to create a resilient freight sector by increasing its ability to prevent, withstand, and quickly recover from major disruptions. Another comment we received was, why was collect input from struck out? Actually, we originally struck out this entire comment, but we actually decided to reframe it. So now the new language says, engage stakeholders in the private sector, local regional governments, and advocacy groups to advise the state throughout the process of developing a state freight mobility plan. And finally, we did revise one sentence in the charter. So now it says, the CFAC shall only release information to the public at the approval of Caltrans. So those were the changes that were made based on the comments we received. Unless there are any comments or any comments from the audience today, I can move this to Jeannie, and Jeannie can approve these changes.
Thank you, Jeff. So as we said, we've discussed most of these changes with you already and had a chance for some additional comments. I think these additional edits that you see on this slide are fairly minor. But we do want to make sure that there's time for any additional comments or questions to be raised. And if we don't have any more changes, we will just approve the amended charter and put this to rest for now. So do we have any questions or comments on the amended charter? Not seeing any hands. I don't know if we've had anything come in on the chat. All right, well, seeing none, I think we can officially adopt the amended charter and hopefully not have to revisit it for a few meetings. So that's good. And we've made up some time in our agenda. So thank you, Jeff, for sharing that, and thank you all for your patience as we've made the updates to the agenda, or the, excuse me, charter. All right, let's move on with our agenda in that case. So the last item is our partner updates and also Caltrans updates. So I think first we want to go to Monica Gordine with FHWA. Monica, do we have you on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I would share my video screen, but I don't think I have that capability in the version of WebEx I have, so I will go ahead with my updates. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to be here this morning. And I want to touch on our previous representative to the CFAC meeting, Tasha Clemens. She typically represents Federal Highway at these meetings, but I just wanted to announce that she has gotten a position with our headquarters office in our Office of Asset Management Unit. So in the interim, I will be taking her place at the CFAC meeting until her position is filled in our office here in California. So I just kind of want to thank her for the work that she has done for the last few years. And moving forward, as I said, I'll be the representative until we fill her vacancy. So there are three things I'd like to touch on this morning. First is just provide a general update. I'd also like to touch on the new administration and talk a little bit about some technology to share with you for Federal Highway. Beginning back, I think it was maybe October of this year, a one-year extension was passed for our FAST Act. So our FAST Act was extended from September 2020 to September 2021 of this year. So that's great for our authorization bill. We got a one-year extension on our authorization bill. In addition, in December, Congress passed an omnibus appropriation bill, which basically provided our funding for the next year. In addition, there was a supplemental bill, the COVID relief package, which provided $900 billion of additional funds, federal funds. So the big question is how much of that is going to come to California? We estimate that California will receive about $918 million of that COVID relief package will come to California, which should be distributed by formula. In addition, I think everyone saw on the news yesterday that we have a new administration. President, the 46th president, was sworn in. And some of Biden's top priorities for his administration are COVID, economic relief, racial equity, and climate change, which is in line with what you're doing here in California. In addition, the president nominated a new Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and I think that he is currently going through Senate confirmation right now. So he hasn't been confirmed, but he has been nominated, and they're holding those hearings right now for his confirmation. In addition, I think 2 days ago, Polly Trottenberg, who was the former New York City Transportation Commissioner, was nominated for Deputy Secretary of Transportation. In addition, we had a new Deputy Federal Highway Administrator, Stephanie Pollock, and she starts on January 25th. So everything is coming in line with appointments and everything. And Ms. Pollock, she was recently the CEO of Massachusetts Department of Transportation. So we look forward to her starting with Federal Highway Administration on Monday. So in the realm of technology sharing, the things that we have implemented here at Federal Highway that you may find informative, our freight management operations, they released a freight mobility trends analysis tool. And the tool basically uses national performance management research data, which is comprised of truck data, as well as high performance monitoring systems to visualize freight high performance at the national level. So the tool has an interactive dashboard, which allows users to measure freight mobility at the national, state, regional, and corridor level. It also identifies freight mobility around ports, intermodal facilities, and border crossings, and also identifies the major freight highway bottlenecks across the nation. The trend analysis tool was used to develop the nation's 100 major freight hire bottlenecks. So I think that many of you may find this analysis tool very useful. And in closing, I'd like to inform you that there should be a next round of infra, should be expected pretty soon here, maybe in the next month or so. So be on the lookout for a NOFO, which is the Notice of Funding Availability for the next round of infra. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. Any questions for Monica? All right.
Jeannie,
see-
apologies. It looks like Michael Cano has a question. I'm just going to unmute him.
Thank you, Allison. Appreciate you keeping an eye.
Okay, Michael, you're unmuted.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the update, and it's a very exciting day in DC. Question is the NOFOs for infra and build that were just released, assuming they were a follow through from the prior administration. Is there a sense that the current administration is going to pull them back, rescind them, or update them with new guidelines? And if so, by when? Because a lot of us are starting the process of identifying projects to let our consulting teams move forward to develop applications. And it would be unfortunate if there's a lot of time and money wasted doing that, if there's going to be any changes that are rather large in terms of the guidelines.
Right. I can look up that information for you. I do not anticipate there being changes, but I cannot say definitely. So I need to get back with you on that question. Seeing that the new administration just came in recently, so I need to follow up on that question for you. And I'll get back with. Should I get back with Jeannie, or who should I touch bases with?
Yes, please, Monica. That would be great.
Okay, perfect.
My staff were also just reminding me if you have any other information about the NOFO you can share.
Okay.
Great. But if we need to do that in follow up, please, let me know.
Right. The NOFO that I was talking about may come out as a new notice of funding availability that may come out in the next month or so. But if there's anything that's open right now, I can follow up on that.
Great. Thanks. Any other questions for Monica? All right. Thank you, Monica. Next, we've got Laura Pennybaker from CTC. Take it away, Laura.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Great. Okay. So Laura Pennybaker here. I am the new Deputy Director for Transportation Planning at the California Transportation Commission. And I wanted to start out with a few staffing updates at CTC. So we've had 2 individuals retire recently that have been involved with this committee. Garth Hopkins and Don Chesser have very deservedly retired after many years of state service at both Caltrans and the CTC working on freight issues, and we miss them terribly. And as the new planning deputy, I will be overseeing the commission's involvement with statewide freight planning. And then I did want to announce Matthew Yozgat as our new deputy director of SB1 programs. He will be overseeing our competitive funding programs, including the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, which we all know and love as TCEP. So that is the staffing update. For our detailed agency update, we are going to focus on where we're at with the TCEP program. And so I wanted to invite Hannah Walter, who is the Commission's TCEP program manager, to make this particular update. I believe many of you know her, and I wanted to give her a chance to introduce herself and update you all on where we're at with TCEP. So Allison, would you mind unmuting Hannah?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Hannah Walter, and I'm the program manager for the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program at the Commission. So just a few really quick things. In December, the Commission adopted the Cycle 2 Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, So for projects that were recommended for funding as a part of that program, they need to have baseline agreements in place by the May Commission meeting. And Caltrans should be working with you on that, but if anyone has any questions, you can also feel free to reach out to me about those. We're already starting to think about the guidelines development process for cycle 3 for the program that would start in 23, 24, 24, 25 would cover those years. And one of the things we're doing as a part of that effort is that we're working on updating the funding targets for each of the freight regions. So as many of you may know, the funding for the program is split 60% for the regions and 40% for Caltrans statewide projects. And for the 60% that goes to the regions, we have regional funding targets that represent the freight need in each region. And so the data that we use to create those targets is really old. So we're working on updating that. And we have a work group in place that is doing that. And a lot of the regional planning agencies are a part of that work group. But if you're interested in participating, then also please let me know and we can add you to our work group list. We just had our first meeting on the 19th and the next one is on February 16th. And then our workshops for cycle 3, we'd appreciate all of the input that we can get for that. We're going to be talking in this next guidelines development process about things like zero emissions infrastructure for the program and how we can improve performance metrics and things like that. Those are some of the issues that we'll be talking about in our upcoming work groups on the guidelines themselves. And that's it. That's my update for the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. I don't see any questions. Allison, I don't know if you're seeing any come in.
Nope, I don't see any at the moment.
All right, thank you, Hannah. Laura, any other updates from the commission?
You know, just a couple things I wanted to highlight. So the commission also is embarking on some equity work that I wanted to make sure I highlighted. We have developed a draft racial equity statement that the commission will be considering at our commission meeting next week. And we are working on convening an equity roundtable. This is something we're working really closely with Caltrans and CalSTA on. So we appreciate their partnership. And, you know, we definitely look forward to engaging with stakeholders on all of this work moving forward. I did also want to just echo what Avital and Darwin mentioned, that commission staff has been engaging very closely on development of the CAPTI. And I did want to highlight that we have asked CalSTA to provide an update regarding the CAPTI at the upcoming March commission meeting. So those are a couple things I wanted to highlight. And then I think that is it for the commission.
Thank you so much, Laura and Hannah. Hannah, I did just see a comment come in on the chat. Eileen Tutt wants to be added to the TSIP list for those workshops. So we'll make sure to get her information to you.
Great.
All right. Any questions for Laura and Hannah? I'm not seeing any hands. So if there aren't any, we'll move on to pass it back to Avital Barnea for updates from CalSTA.
Thanks, Jeannie. Hi again, everybody. I just have a few things I want to touch on. So I know it's been a little while since the TSEP awards were announced. That happened last November. That the CTC approved nearly $1.4 billion in TSEP funding. But I just wanted to mention that we were really pleased that the funding list includes several projects that align with the goals laid out in the California Freight Mobility Plan, such as environmental stewardship, healthy communities, multimodal mobility, asset management, and more. We haven't had a meeting of the CFAC since the TSEP awards were announced, so I definitely wanted to bring that up. I know we've also had conversations reiterating that the California Freight Mobility Plan itself is not a funding plan, and the projects contained therein are not tied to any specific funding source. But programs like TSEP provide a venue to help implement the goals contained in the CFMP and really help us reach those goals. So something that Caltrans tried to do this year in order to be successful in obtaining funding for those projects was to partner with regional transportation agencies to support the projects together. And that's a little bit in contrast to the 2018 TSEP project list where there was some partnership, but on this project list, you'll see that all of the projects receiving part of the state share are also receiving part of the regional share allocation, which shows those partnerships that Caltrans has fostered to advance the projects that are of the highest statewide and regional priority. We know that project planning can take years and even decades, and there are projects that have been on the books for a really long time. But what this list and our statewide goals show is that we are moving more toward multimodal and intermodal projects to increase freight efficiency and not just strictly on capacity increasing highway projects. And so we're really pleased to see that broad list of projects. And we're also encouraged by the strong partnership that the state and the regions have developed to advance these projects, which will help improve this movement throughout California while helping to reduce the environmental impact of our transportation system. We certainly encourage the development of more of the types of projects that will help us meet the goals laid out in the CFMP and also in the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure that you heard Darwin and I talk about today. Okay, moving on to a different topic. This was also mentioned during one of the comments during the CAPTI presentation, but a couple weeks ago, Governor Newsom submitted his annual budget proposal to the state legislature totaling over $227 billion. And the budget provides funding for COVID-19 response and relief efforts while also advancing long-term strategies for an equitable and broad-based economic recovery. What's probably most of note to this group is that the budget includes $1.5 billion to accelerate California's commitment to clean vehicles. That funding will help meet the objectives of Executive Order N7920, which we talked about in the CAPTI presentation. And that executive order specifically calls to move all sales of in-state passenger cars and trucks to be zero emission by 2035. That $1.5 billion will be targeted to clean trucks, buses, and off-road freight equipment, as well as the Clean Cars for All programs. And those funds will also be used to facilitate the construction of electric vehicle charging stations and hydrogen fueling stations, which, as we all know, are necessary to accelerate the adoption of zero-emission vehicles. I want to be really clear that this funding will be administered by CARB and by the California Energy Commission, but CalSTA, as well as the iBank and other relevant agencies and departments, will work in coordination with them to administer that funding. It's looking like that funding will be distributed through CARB's HVIP, the Hybrid and Zero Emission Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Program, as well as the Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Project. And generally, eligible applicants for that funding include individuals, businesses, nonprofits, or governments that are located in California or have a California-based affiliate. All right, and then lastly, I wanted to mention that CalSTA is leading regular meetings with freight industry associations regarding coordination around COVID-19. We are currently meeting on a bi-weekly basis with the California Association of Port Authorities. We're meeting with the California Trucking Association. We're also meeting with the California Transit Association and the California Association for Coordinated Transportation. And in addition, Secretary Kim is hosting a critical infrastructure task force meeting on a biweekly basis with attendees from other state agencies and federal agencies, including the Office of Emergency Services, Health and Human Services, SCOBIZ, the Energy Commission, PUC, Department of Finance, and then at the federal level, FEMA and USDOT. These meetings started in March. They've been going on for a while. But as the pandemic has worn on, we had reduced the frequency of those meetings, first to biweekly and then to monthly. But now, as we're seeing COVID cases rise again since the holiday, we've moved back to biweekly meetings of that group. Previously, that group was focused on goods movement issues such as temporarily extending the expiration of commercial driver's licenses and vehicle registration while the DMV is closed, raising truck weight limits for the movement of essential goods, and providing PPE to transportation and logistics employees and employers. But we've gotten a good handle on those items for now, and so now for the most part, this group is focusing on conversations primarily around COVID testing and vaccine distribution. In case you haven't heard yet, the transportation and logistics sector is in phase 1B, tier 2 of the vaccine priority list. And that's out of 3 phases in the vaccine priority distribution. The first phase is 1A, which includes healthcare workers and residents of long-term care facilities. And then the next phase, 1B, includes 2 tiers of priority. Last week, Governor Newsom announced that the state is moving into phase 1B, tier 1, which includes people over the age of 65 and those who work in education, childcare, emergency services, and food and agriculture. And then phase 1B will be next, although we don't know exactly when that will be, but transportation and logistics workers will be included in that grouping. There's one more phase after that, phase 1C, which among other groups includes people aged 50 and older, people aged 16 to 49 who have underlying health conditions, and those who work in government operations. So that's all I have to share with you today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Avital. Any questions for Avital? I'm not seeing any. Allison, are you seeing any questions?
Nope, I'm not seeing any.
All right. Well, thank you, Avital. I especially appreciate the updates on the vaccine. Everybody's on everybody's minds these days. Thank you. All right, for our last update, I'm going to pass it back to Marlon for some additional Caltrans updates.
All right, thanks, Jeannie. I have a couple of updates here. The first, I'm going to start out with staff updates. I wanted to announce to the group that Yatman Kwan, he has accepted an acting assignment as our assistant division chief in our policy section. So in Yatman's acting role, he's going to be overseeing our regional planning function, our state planning, as well as climate change and our economics and data management group. So go ahead and please, if you get a moment, just to congratulate Yatman on the assignment. And then taking over for Yatman will be Eric Fredericks. So he's going to be our office chief for our freight planning office. So again, if you can just congratulate Eric, greatly appreciate it. Both well-deserved temporary promotions. And so just wanted to make that announcement. And that was all effective. Yatman was effective at the beginning of the calendar year. And then Eric's was effective this week. So congratulations to both of them. Also, just wanted to let everyone know our sustainable transportation planning grant has been opened up. And so the call for applications was December the 10th. And applications are due February the 12th. and the announcements for the grants are expected sometime around June of this year. Our 12 district offices have held several virtual workshops this month about the application process. If you've missed any of those workshops, our next workshop is going to be January the 28th. And this is going to be a Caltrans statewide workshop, and it's going to be from 9:30 to 11:30 or 11 o'clock. So if you want to attend those, you can reach out. And I'm going to include the link in the chat on to our website. And so if you want any additional information on the grant program, you're more than welcome. We have spent a lot of time developing the guidelines to align with our California Transportation Plan 2050, as well as our other modal plans around freight and rail. So if you're interested in submitting an application, some ideas include freight and goods movement plans and studies, sustainable freight plans, freight supply chain resiliency studies, as well as curbside freight management plans. And so there's just some examples, but just wanted to make you guys know that the program does allow for submittals on freight. So we want to make sure that we get the word out on that. Also, just in regards to the data front, our freight branch, or excuse me, our data branch is actually coordinating discussions with MPOs and state agencies about a statewide travel data purchase. And this would be from cell phones, passive sources, and really in sort of the big data realm. And so our goal really is to, we've actually had a number of conversations with MPOs and cities, and it seems like everyone is wanting to have access to some of this big data. And so, rather than, having everyone, kind of purchasing this data on their own, we want to try to leverage an opportunity to maybe look at the feasibility of the state maybe taking a role in this, and then coordinating with the regions to be able to have access to this data, maybe at a reduced cost. So these are different things that we're examining. We are coordinating with the MPOs, and so we'll have more to share on that front. But just want to let you guys know that's something that we're working on. The California Transportation Plan is going through the final approval process. So once it's approved, they'll be posted to our website. And after we post it to the website, we are going to be developing a implementation element, which will be released. And it's going to provide a framework for implementation, and we'll be reporting to the commission, the California Transportation Commission, annually on our progress. So, we are really interested in once we start that process of getting feedback in terms of how we're going to be moving forward. We're going to be identifying performance measures and really hoping to complement some of the other work around the CAPD effort, as well as some of the other implementation efforts around some of our modal plans. And so we want to make sure that everything is complementing one another. So more to share on that. And then finally, we have a couple of different freight studies on the way. We have our Marine Highway 580, or the M580 study that's almost complete, the network optimization study. There's a final stakeholder meeting that's going to be taking place on February the 2nd at 2 p.m. And so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Jeff or Eric. And then we have a statewide truck parking study that is at the beginning of its stages right now in the planning process. And we'll be having a technical advisory committee meeting on February the 10th at 1 p.m. So if you have any questions on that, feel free again to reach out to Eric or Jeff. And we encourage you all, if you can attend the meeting, that would be great. And then we'll plan on coming back to CFAC to talk about the studies at a later date. So stay tuned. And that concludes my updates. Happy to answer any questions if you guys have any.
Thanks, Marlon.
Marlon, there was a comment in the chat.
Okay. All right, so I'll go ahead and read that. So big data purchase, regional needs for big data is less frequent, mid-size and small MPOs encourage that negotiations take into account frequency. Our MPO may only need it once every 4 years, given your cycles with your regional transportation plans. So yeah, we're hoping to get a lot of that information. Right now we're in the very, very beginning stages, but yeah, we'll certainly take that into account as we're moving through the process. So thanks for that feedback.
Any other questions for Marlon? There's a lot of activity going on, so we want to make sure that you are staying updated on what we're up to, and of course our partners as well. Thank you to all of our partners who've provided updates. I'm glad to say, now a little bit ahead of schedule, so we've been very efficient in our panel updates. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. So I think first thing I need to do is just check and see if there are any public comments. Do we have any public comments, team?
LA Metro would like to make an announcement. So Michael, I will unmute you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I wanted to thank Avital and the whole CalSDA team for a terrific freight working group meeting that Secretary Kim gave a keynote speech and also a Q&A with about 100 of our freight stakeholders in LA County. And we're just very appreciative of that time and generosity of working with us, and hopefully we can have continued dialogue like that and provide the Secretary with direct opportunities to interact with our stakeholders throughout LA County. A lot of the people on this call, I think, from LA County were on that as well. And so very much appreciate that and reaching out. Also, we have produced our LA County strategic plan for freight for 2021. And that is approved by our committee. We'll go to the board next week. But we're looking forward to sharing that with this group once it is official. But it does reflect many of the values of the California Freight Mobility Plan, including looking at economic competitiveness, environmental sustainability, and social equity, and how do they interact and work together for our region and for the state. So a very big thank you to Avital and your team, and appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Michael. We might invite you to share your plan at an upcoming CFAC meeting if you're willing. That sounds great. And thank you for your comments. Any other public comments at the end of the meeting here? Just make sure that nobody has their hand up. All right, well, we can close the public comments. Thank you all for a robust engagement on this agenda. We covered quite a bit of ground. Certainly there's a lot of interest in the CAPTI effort that CalSTA is leading and how that will influence funding going forward. So I'm sure we will have more discussion on that. And all of the efforts, the implementation of the Freight Mobility Plan, all the efforts that Eric and Jeff shared. We also really appreciate your input on those studies. I think those are super important as we're going forward into developing projects, working on projects, and implementing the plan. We want to really get a lot of input on that work. So lots of opportunities for partnership And I will just cover a few action items that the team sent to me. The first was there were some questions at the very beginning of the meeting about performance criteria for TSIP. So we will work with CTC. I think it actually relates to Hannah Walter's update about the TSIP workshops. So that's probably the place for those discussions to happen, but we'll follow up with all of you and make sure you're getting the information about the workshops and can plug into discussions on TSIP. The second, I think this was my suggestion, but to have an update on the state rail plan at our next CFAC meeting. So I'll work with our Division of Rail and Mass Transportation and bring that to our next meeting. I know we've got some of the DRMT team on the line today that can take back some of the comments and the feedback you all provided about the importance of rail planning and projects. Third item is to continue to get feedback from you on folks that we should interview and talk to about our freight resilience plan. There were lots of good suggestions, so we will follow up on those. And then for Monica at FHWA, she's going to check back on the status of the NOFOs for infra and build and see if there are any changes under the new transportation secretary. And we'll share that back out. And then last thing was there were a couple of people who specifically asked to be added to the Hannah's list for CTC for the TSIP workshops. We'll make sure to make those links. Did I miss any action items, team? All right. Well, with that, we can actually adjourn a little bit early and give you some time back in your day. Thank you all so much for your engagement and participation on CFAC. We really appreciate your partnership, and we'll schedule another meeting very soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks all.